Good morning, everyone. I think we have most people are here. Um, Again, good morning. We're so happy to see everyone here today. My name is Michael Lee, and I'm a curator working with the China, Korea, and Sven Hedin collections at the National Museums of World Culture in Sweden. I'm also the project leader for the Taking Care project in our organization. And today and tomorrow, I will be co-hosting as, co-moderating with my colleague, Dr. Aoife O'Brien.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Aoife O'Brien. I'm the curator for the Oceania collections here at the National Museums of World Culture. So like Michael mentioned, I'm working with him and other colleagues in the museum on the Taking Care project and on our experimental exhibition. So I'll be co-moderating with Michael, so you'll be seeing either of our faces throughout the 2 days. So just want to say a very warm welcome to you all, and I'm really looking forward to hopefully very interesting days. Thanks.
So these 2 days will be quite dense, and we hope that everyone who has requested a care package has received it. We went with the Swedish fika theme, but it's also an excuse to help fuel us through the 2 days of workshops with sugar. So please consume when necessary. Our colleagues Kamen Zlatev and Anna Tarshis will be helping out behind the scenes with our technical requirements. If anybody has any technical problems these 2 days, please contact either of them. We'll put their emails into the chat, but you can also find their emails in the invitation that was sent out. Other colleagues from the National Museums of World Culture are also participating these 2 days, and I think probably most of you will have some time to meet with them at some point during the discussions and small group discussions as well. A note to the speakers and partners that will be presenting, and this mainly applies to the longer presentations. One of the moderators, either Aoife or myself, will interrupt. We'll send you a 5-minute note in the chat once you have 5 minutes left, and at 2 minutes we will break in and just verbally remind that there's 2 minutes left. And this is to ensure that the schedule for the 2 days run as smoothly as possible, and that everyone will have their allocated times to speak. During the question and answer sessions, please feel free to use the chat to ask questions. Otherwise, you can also raise your virtual hand to ask the questions yourself. And also please use the chat function to comment, to share links or other relevant information. Before we go on, is Sui Lan here? I think she has just a report for everybody, quick report.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to say hi really quickly and wanted to say in person that I'm actually leaving the museum because, yeah, I found something new and I was on a terminated contract here anyways. So I'm leaving the museum by the end of this month and moving on to the Department of Culture and Media here in Hamburg. So I will stay here. But yeah, so I'm really sorry about leaving all of you. I was already really excited about yeah, that things are moving and yeah, and that all the workshops are scheduled for the next month. And I'm really sorry to not be able to join all of you. But yeah, I hope I can stay in some kind of way affiliated and follow what you're working on over the next years. Yeah, so yeah.
Congratulations on your new job, Silan, but please do keep in touch with all of us. We'd like to follow also your career path. Other than the partners participating during these 2 days, some of the speakers and guests related to the Taking Care project will also be participating in the discussions, and we welcome them and thank them for their time. I know some of you have had to either stay up or will be staying up late nights or maybe waking up very early to participate. And I know some of you are also getting over illnesses, so we very much appreciate your time here. So let's jump into the content then. Much of the Creative Study Lab was developed through dialogue with the partners, particularly with the partners that are meeting here today. So those that have been in the meetings, thank you very much for also your comments and contributions. We have also had discussions with partners, particularly with Slovenia, about how it could really help to have very practical approaches in the workshops that we have. So when we created the format for these 2 days, we really tried to endeavor towards being very practical and help us think practically. We hope that people will find this a useful workshop and be inspired to apply the lessons we may learn in the next 2 days in your work as museum and culture professionals. So just very quickly to run through the 2 days. Oh, by the way, if your name is not your actual name on the, like where your picture is, if you would like to, it'd be good to maybe put your name on there so then we know who everyone is that might be speaking. So about the content, we're working with the topic of sustainability on day 1 and the concept of care on day 2. And as we were working to structure the 2 days, we realized that the topic of sustainability and care are interconnected, like the first talk will demonstrate. So there will be some interweaving of topics between today and tomorrow. On sustainability, of course, topics of resource and environmental sustainability are included. However, as museums have the potential to connect collections with communities, the sustainability of the relationship between museums and communities will also be a focus of this workshop. And just to let everybody know, to remind everybody, the talks will be recorded, the formal talks will be recorded, and they will be made available to everyone afterwards. So our first talk today will be by Professor Yuan-chao Maeva Tong, who is the Associate Professor of the Department of Anthropology and the Director of the Taiwan Center for Pacific Studies at Taiwan National University. Dr. Yuan-chao or Maeva Tong began working in collections-related projects at the start of the digitization scheme initiated by the National Science Council in Taiwan in the early 2000s. She has worked on the ethnography of the Pacific collection at the National Taiwan University's Anthropology Museum, then moved on to a general view of the Paiwan collection. During this process, she and her team began to build up contacts and trust with source communities, and this friendship later became the foundation of more cooperative projects. She has carried out 3 such kinds of bridge building projects between museums and communities, and the Kaviyangan community was the focus of one of them. So we welcome Dr. Tong and Ms. Wei-chun. Ms. Wei-chun will also be supporting the talk. So please, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for your invitation from so far away a country, and also a region that I feel very honored. And I would like to share with you our experiences with digitization and cooperative exhibition, and especially with the Makai's wedding. And in 2015, and what happened afterwards. And I have there are about 11 topics I want to mention, but especially I'll focus on the latter half of the outline. And so I'll give you a brief background about our collection. It's mainly collected in the 1920s, early 1930s, under the Japanese colonial ruling. And most of our collection are focused on Taiwan indigenous peoples. They make up about less than 3% of our total population, and there are 16 different language and cultural groups. They are quite different. And Kaviyangan is the second largest indigenous group. There are about 100,000 of them. So it's the second largest. And they are spread out in different counties, different cities. And although they are the second largest ethnic group, indigenous group, they are located in a large space. And Japanese ruled Taiwan from 1895 till 1945, 50 years. And I think it's easier to talk this way. As during the 50 years of Japanese ruling, where our university once was Japanese Imperial University, was established in 1928, and anthropology was one of the earliest discipline set up in 1928. And together with the Department of Anthropology, there was also the collection from the Japanese, provided mainly by the Japanese government, and also from private donors, and also purchased from the market, the free market. And so Taiwan was taken over by the nationalist Chinese government in 1945. And it was kind of a neo-colonial relations between the government, the main major population, Han Chinese, and indigenous people. It's similar to the Japanese colonial administration before. But the situation, the power inequality changed, gradually changed since mid-1980s. So that's, and before that, there was a high expectation from indigenous community, because the University Museum was a research-oriented museum, and it was part of anthropology department. And as a research museum, it was close to the public. And for other researchers in different institutions, they needed to go through a very difficult application process. For that, we had a reputation for hard to deal with. And for other researchers, and especially for indigenous researchers or indigenous activists. And that was the burden my generation carried over since from earlier period. And so we've encountered very strong expectation for the use or just knowledge about our collection. Before the digitalization, it was really difficult. And but we changed our standing to become an educational institution instead and open to the public 6 days a week. It's a major change for our museum. It happened in 2010. And we changed under the pressure, and also because the new museum studies, the new museum era. And during this time, we also experienced policy changes and political pressure for us to curate the museum, our collection differently, to cater especially to indigenous population. And policy-wise, we experienced digitization. The projects started in early 2000, and then also there's a we are also required to comply with Cultural Heritage Preservation Act, and under the act, there was political maneuvering for us to have more artifacts, indigenous artifacts, to be listed as to go through the national registry. That's what happened about Mogai. We were under indigenous political representatives to go through the process to have precious artifacts be recognized by the national preservation system. So we applied for the status of national treasure in with two artifacts. One's Mogai, the ancestral statue of Gavyongang. And with these political and policy changes, and we see a different social atmosphere to recognize and promote indigenous peoples and cultures in Taiwan in general. So, and then we, in our university museum, Anthropology Museum, we have Mogai, the statue of Mogai, and also another statue from Vanguard, another different tribe, to apply for the status of national treasure. And then that's how the whole story about Mogai's wedding starts. And then I'll go through very quickly about the outline, then I'll go through the content with more pictures. So with these two cases, one's a marriage of one of local communities, they agreed to apply, to go through the application process. And then after the two artifacts were granted the status of national treasure, they wanted to have large-scale public ceremonies to announce, to make people know what happened with their artifacts. So we have this marriage of Mogai for Gavyongang, and then there's also swarm siblinghood with Vanguard, another tribe. It happened in 2016. Then I'll give you some details about the wedding, especially, and I will not talk about Vanguard's case here. And then I'll go on with what happened with Gavyongang. They agreed with the application, and they happily proposed to have a wedding for the new status and how they perceive themselves. So I'll talk about their self-positioning. And then I'll go on with what marriage is for Taiwan people. And then based on their perception of wedding, we developed relationships with Gavyongang. So there's an indigenous perception of the public ceremony. And then on our side, our students wanted to be more involved in the new relations. So they proposed to become relatives or affines of Gavyongang based on the wedding. So the foundation was a wedding, and from the wedding, they're derived different activities and relationships. And our students participated in their youth training camp and also Harvest Festival since 2017. And then they move along as youth along the age grades. And gradually, some students maintained these long-term relations, and at least 2 of them now they live in Kaviyangan village. And this year, just next week, we'll welcome our first student from Kaviyangan village. And as conclusion, I'll talk about the return to indigenous rights and parallel legal frameworks working here. The parallel legal frameworks, they appear to be conflictual, but I think it's not necessary to be conflictual. Here's some background about Gavyongang's experiences with Cultural Heritage Preservation Act. Before Magai, that NTU, our university, applied for status of national treasure in 2015. In 2012, they had another statue, Ancestral post, collected by Academia Sinica, applied for the status of national treasure. That's their first experience with a Preservation Act. And based on that, they thought they had to do it differently with Magai. They couldn't go along with outside academic institution the same as the first time. So after the application for after the granting for the granting of the national treasure for the first post, Muridan. And also there was a documentary about repatriation of indigenous artifacts based on Muridan and other artifacts from a different tribe. The village head, he said, after screening discussion, he said, we should not be discouraged. We shall work together to bring our culture and traditional spirit back to Kaviyangan. So they were kind of discouraged because they didn't do much with the Muridan application process. So they were gathering information, knowledge, and courage. And that's what we university, National Taiwan University encountered. Gavyongang was ready to cooperate, to go along with the process. Then after they asked to be involved in the application process. So they took part in the review committee, and they gave their opinions, and they gave their tribute, a traditional song to their ruling family. And then they talked to the university to have a wedding as a public announcement of their the status of national treasure. And actually, it's 6 years yesterday. So why they wanted to have a wedding? Because wedding was especially significant in Taiwan society. Kaviyangan is Taiwan, one of the 16 groups. It's an event to express the preciousness of the bride by a display of bountiful material. So most of these material are considered bride price, bride wealth, and then also to demonstrate the strength of her village. They could gather a lot of labor and a lot of material to display in the during the wedding. Also, the marriage provides an opportunity to practice various cultural skills and solidify different sections of the village across gender and generations. Because marriage of high class, high status bride doesn't happen very often. So probably several decades, you have this high status marriage. So they needed this wedding, high status wedding to practice cultural skills. And also it happens in this wedding. So they did this on purpose as a way of cultural revival. And in general, in principle, marriage is a mechanism. I should say, marriage or wedding is a mechanism to make allies or to solidify allies. And you see drawings, pictures, paintings of weddings. And the first one is a fabric weaving. And you see these kind of pictures, the images everywhere by famous artists and also by artists, local artists. It's everywhere. For example, at the front piece, the piece on the above, you see at the center of the circle, it's a swing. The swing is reserved for high status bride only. And that's what Gavyongang people have been doing a month before the marriage in mid-September. They were they needed to prepare specific foods for high status wedding. And the picture on the right corner, you see, it's men were carving logs from the hill area, and the logs had to be of specific species. And they were also learning long forgotten wedding songs reserved for high status bride. So the whole village were mobilized. You can see teenagers, they sat in the front, and the elders, they sat at the back of the room. And they came one day before the wedding for rehearsal and also to set up the wedding swings on our campus. So you see this the works, the swings, and singing and dancing based on different traditions on our campus. And here's a few pictures of another case, Bongali's case of swan siblinghood. Their head woman was carrying over their shoulders from off the bus to our museum. And they had ritual. And Wei-chun will talk about the ritual a little bit later. And they had rituals to communicate with their ancestral spirits in the museum. And here's sharing of food and wine afterwards between the two representatives of NTU and Vanguard community for the sworn siblinghood. And how Gavyongang people see the wedding. Traditionally, in principle, the wedding is a mechanism to make friends, to make allies, to make relatives. And they stress 2 points. One thing is they always say, we can always get a divorce. So marriage doesn't, they don't give up the right to Wagai, the ancestral post, by a marriage. There's remaining rights to the post, and they can always get a divorce. And they made a purpose to pay tribute to Wagai every time when they came to Taipei. When they came to our campus, they made a purpose to visit Wagai, to maintain their relation with the post. And they didn't know about the name of Wagai as their one of the ancestries. And they learned the name and a little of her background as we started an investigation for the application. So we are reconnecting with the community. They are reconnecting and connecting with Wagai. That's a picture of their visit of Wagai. And once they had established contacts with Wagai and Mulidan, the first artifact, they maintain regular relationship with these two artifacts, these two ancestors. So this is in 2012. They had Mulidan in the church, a Catholic church, during the harvest mass. And then after 2015, they also had Wagai in the church for the service. So that's a remaking of Wagai in 2016. And after that, Wagai, the reproduced Wagai was placed in the ruling family's house, and they were moved. It was removed to the church during harvest mass. So you see here at the center of the altar, it's a replica of Mulidan, and at the side of it was Wagai. You see the Wagai at the side. And also there are offerings, traditional offerings, millet and pork, cooked pork at the bottom of Wagai. And during the ordinary days, Wagai was placed at the house of the ruling family, Jingru's family. And during rituals, they would provide offerings at the Jingru's family. You see a combination of different beliefs. And our relationships went further than further. And for Taiwan people, they will consider a marriage is a way to make allies. The allies is especially important in foreign, strange place. So you probably have you will have a friend in a potentially hostile area. So NTU, we act as the friendly shelter for their visit. So they asked their young men to visit NTU campus to give us an invitation card for the Harvest Festival. And the trial for the young man during the initiation rite was for him to visit our museum, to visit and pay his tribute to Mogai, to the statue of Mogai, by singing traditional song to Mogai. Since 2016, they have done it every year. And our students also took part in youth initiation process since 2017. So you see the male with bare upper body. He was going through the initiation. Our young female students, they had this red vest in. And here's the opening ceremony of the Harvest Festival. And if you are a guest of honor, you sit next to the entrance of the house. But our students, we all sit with the community. So we are not considered as guests of honor. We wanted to be part of the community instead of guests. So we have a double role, and our students always struggle between these two roles. So they were designated to be to do certain duties with the community. They dance together and they carry the offering to the ruling family together. And also they share their what they have learned at the end of the festival with the rest of the community. So they are just one of the young members of the community. And the university president once visited the Jingru family, the ruling family, and other professors at the department, archaeologists also visited there and helped out by examining artifacts from their old village site. And they also visited our campus, the young members and also the elders. And we had a planned tour for them, and also the visit of the city. And also they came with us, they came to our university for the film screening. So we have the screening at the village first, and then we have another screening on campus. And I have my separate collaboration with the community. For example, the first year project was a relinking with a neighboring Pingpu community. And they wanted me, it's a kind of collaboration because they asked me to do a research about their traditional relations with this community. Through this community, they became Catholics. So the community was very important to them. They were the first Catholic indigenous community. And also they became involved in self-representation in academic communities. I invited them to workshops on artifact repatriation, and also a forum examining the marriage, Mogai's marriage, and in 2019. And I'll just come to the conclusion. What happens is they applied for exclusive right to the use of intellectual creations. And Mogai, the statue of Mogai, the design, the image, the story, the history of it was considered intellectual creation. And they were granted exclusive right under the Protection Act for Traditional Intellectual Creations of Indigenous Peoples. they were granted an exclusive right in just last year, and they were contacted by a beer company. So the Mogai was put on the beer can. And so there's a parallel legal frameworks in Taiwan. Once, so it's under the kind of basic indigenous, the basic indigenous law. So we have kind of two constitutions. One's for the indigenous people, one's for the larger society. So the statue of Mogai, the image of Mogai, is covered by these two legal systems. So we two sides, we negotiate if there's an application for the use of the image, or if we need to relocate the statue of Mogai for renovation reasons, we needed to cooperate with them. So we don't know the legal definition, the boundary between these two systems. But so far it works fine. Okay. And based on the case of Mogai and also the wedding, and we see the community is connecting with the past. Mogai is serving to them. Mogai also serves to revitalize the community, the traditional culture. But at the same time, it also helps to network with the larger community, the larger society. I'll stop here and I'll let Wei-chun to go on with her part.
For my part, I will share a story from my work experience. So let's start the outline. Firstly, is a brief introduction of the Vanguard ancestral post. And secondly, is the main part of my PowerPoint presentation. It's about our thoughtfulness turn out to be the source communities' uneasiness. And then is the remedy. Now we perform a ritual. And finally is what we are going to do in the future. So turn to the first part. First part is an introduction of the Vanguard ancestral post. The post comes from Vanguard, another Taiwan community, Aluwan. There's an NTU and Aluwan have been sworn siblings since 2016. And in 1930, the post was collected. And there are two sides on the post. One side is in an image of a male ancestor, and on the other side is a female ancestor. Secondly, I will talk about the main point. It's what a pity. Our thoughtfulness turned out to be their uneasiness. In 2018, we did repair work in our exhibition hall. Before the work started, we moved all small display objects back to the collection storeroom. For heavy and huge objects, we took precautions to protect them. We laid acid-free paper as the first layer, cushion as the second layer, wood board cover as a third layer. The wood board had to be up to F1 standard, that is with lowest formaldehyde and already heated to kill possible bugs. Finally, we erected scaffolding and started to work. You can see the pictures. Okay. It think everything followed preservation process. Great. We didn't tell the community about renovation plan and our procedures. That means they were unaware of protective procedure for renovation. However, one day, a ritual specialist asked us, "What have you done to our ancestor post?" Ancestors appeared in my dream and complained, "We are uncomfortable." They told me they couldn't see anything. After telling him what we had done, they responded, "No, their faces shouldn't have been covered. It's a severe taboo." So here is the remedy. After completing repair work, we offered rice wine and betel nuts in the museum exhibition hall to apologize for the offense. Now, if any repair work or activities is going to be undertaken, we always perform a simple ritual to tell ancestors in advance. We also perform rituals before special days, such as Ghost Festival, Moon Festival, Spring Break, and so on. In simple rituals, we offer rice wine, pork jerky as a sign of sincerity. In the beginning, we prepared rice wine only. Then we found it was improper. For some groups, didn't have wine. Considering different traditions, we offer pork jerky in addition to rice wine. However, for conservation needs, our simple ritual takes an hour. Then, in addition to the rituals we performed for repair work, indigenous peoples also perform simple rituals before doing research at museum. Recently, more and more indigenous peoples, especially among young generation, try to get traditional skills and culture back. Museum collections are the key clues. We accept application of collection research at museum. Some communities will hold a simple ritual before starting to do the research. It means for some source communities, there are spirits in artifacts. The museum always has a willingness to cooperate with them. And finally, in the future, we are planning to plant millet. This is, for the picture, this is a millet farmland, hoping we can come make millet wine by ourselves the next year. This is because actually the rice is a symbol of colonization. So we try to make more doing something right. Okay. Thank you. This end. Thank you. 那我就停止分享。
Thank you so much, Dr. Tong and Ms. Huang. I was so excited that the two of you accepted the invitation to speak, because when I learned about this wedding, Mukai's wedding, I thought it was one of the most interesting examples I've heard about how an organization, can build a sustaining relationship so that, of course, the students gain a lot, but the community itself is also to gain and really revitalize the culture. Dr. Tong, we found a link to the film about Mugai's wedding and the marriage to National Taiwan University. Would it be okay to put that link into the chat so that people can see?
Sure.
Okay, I think maybe Aoife can help with that, or I'll put it on later. But we can open the floor up to some questions and comments for about 15 minutes, I believe.
Chat. Okay.
Or if there's nothing yet, I can have a start. This initiation for the digitization process, what was the reason for that? Was it in order to work more with source communities, or was that just one of the benefits that came from the digitization push?
The latter was the situation. It was a huge national project, and it focused on the so-called cultural economy. So it wanted to mobilize all possible the cultural resources stored in different institutions to open the resources to industrialists, to companies for private reuse. So it's the same. It's a same economic consideration as the beer can. So we have the indigenous intellectual rights regulations, but it's also focusing on possible economic benefits.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Kanika Gupta. Hello, Kanika. Is there anything we know about who made the sculptures or images we saw and how old they are?
We don't know about the sculptors. And we just, in the past, that's what we have learned. We wanted to preserve these statues, but traditionally they got rotten and they were left in the field, and they would remake new ones. So they were replaced regularly.
Okay, thank you. I can't quite see if anybody has their hand up from the participants.
No, there's a question in from Tina asking how did you, Dr. Tung mentioned the colonial history of the collections, and how did you in the museum address this past with the communities, and if you addressed it with the community, so the colonial legacy of the collections that you have?
Yeah, I think we are kind of conservative, and we are quite reserved. We didn't have any open statement about the colonial past, but we practice in a lot more friendlier way with the indigenous communities. So for them, for our museum staff, the major thing they do is to facilitate the visit of indigenous communities and to help the indigenous researchers to use our materials. Yeah, it became their major work. And before, it's impossible. Just 10 years ago, it's not there.
Can I ask a question as well?
Sure.
I'm curious to know how the university's governing body reacted to, first of all, the presence of organics in the museum space when you're offering your rituals to the ancestral figures, but also in probably the different processes that you had to develop within the museum to arrange a wedding between the university and the object and the community. So how did the governing body within the university react or respond?
The museum, we have only 2 to 3. We have 2 full-time staff, and one is in a temporary basis. So, and we have a small budget, and the museum, the operation has to rely on professors' own projects. So it's the university didn't realize the importance, or they didn't accept the importance of museums as we see them. And so for the wedding or the Swan Brotherhood, the museum staff and also our department, anthropology department, we are tied together. Our students and faculty and staff, we did this preparation together. I was not in the museum. I was not in the advisory board of the museum, but I helped. I brought in my contacts and I facilitated the communication. So we had to rely on personal contribution. And we had this, we could get funding from Ministry of Culture. And with the stage set up, the university president was willing to participate as a representative of the groom side. So he was at the wedding, playing the role of the groom. Yeah. And also, of course, the university gave us some funding later. Yeah. And also they paid as a kind of supplementary coursework to invite Gavyongang youth group to come to Taipei, to our campus. Yeah. So we had to maneuver around.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Jackie? Hi, Jackie.
Yes, hello everybody, and thank you for the presentation. I have a small question about having rituals in the campus or in a museum. I would like to know how you see that as a transitory act or as an answer for a better future. Why do you have this kind of thing? I mean, doing rituals in the campus. Just a curiosity.
You mean not the wedding? It's a ritual of offering.
Yeah, any kind of rituals. Just why to do that in a campus and not in another place, or because some objects are there in the campus, I suppose.
The wedding should take place in a village. The grooms, the bride side, but we couldn't move the statue to the village. It's in the museum already since early 1930s. And the Kaviyangan people wanted to become visible. They are far away from Taipei, the metropolitan Taipei city. And they were in down south, 300 kilometers away. So they wanted to have the publicity to become visible in the large society. And also with a lot of publicity, with a lot of news covering, they would be seen by other indigenous communities. They were highly criticized. At the same time, they were envied. Just this year, in August, I heard people from other Taiwan community said, how come the Japanese didn't come to their community to collect artifacts? Then they would develop relations with outside institutions. It became I would call Gavyongang heritage community now. So it's a resource management.
Yeah. But that's why I was.
Yes.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
That's why I was asking the question. Do you think it will be something that we do like that now because we cannot do otherwise, or it's a transition for something else in the future? That
I'll say it's open. The future arrangement for the artifact is open. See, they never relinquish their rights to the ancestral pole. They would announce that publicly. They would say that we can get a divorce, we'll have her back, but not now.
okay.
They would say, they would get engaged in the preservation discourse, or that we have to have a museum before we have her back. They would say that, but I think also they consider having a relationship with Ministry of Culture, with National Taiwan University is beneficial.
Okay.
But that goes along with their future intention to have her back. They don't have to give up on her.
Okay, thank you.
Because the wedding goes along very well with Taiwan's idea of making allies. So for them, they work well. They don't have to sacrifice their rights to the ancestral post.
Thank you. We have a question from Claudia Augustat from Vienna. Can you please explain more about the discussions in the repatriation workshops?
Repatriation was never talked about openly, publicly in Taiwan. And there are many new legal regulations concerning indigenous rights. But repatriation, even in 2016, we had a new version of Preservation Act, but repatriation was not in any section of it. So I talked to the law specialists behind the modification of the Preservation Act in 2016. He said, because most of the people who are friendly with indigenous and sympathetic to indigenous rights movement are anthropologists, or people have experience with indigenous artifacts. They work in museums. So they didn't want to have an issue could cause conflicts of interest with their friends. So it's behind, they are eager, they are anxious about the issue, but it's behind the scene. Yeah, so I organized a workshop to talk about it. So, and then we have a transcript of 31 pages to lay the foundation for later discussion of repatriation. And just last week, 2 weeks ago, a program in Indigenous TV, they had a session on this issue, but I haven't had a chance to see it.
Thank you. I think this, maybe you answered most of this next question from Bianca Leadi in Sweden. Did you have requests for restitution as well, or mainly these kinds of relational ceremonial solutions?
Our university, I don't think we have any cases of restitution. At another museum, National Taiwan Museum, they had such an arrangement, not in terms of restitution. It's indirectly returning artifact to the community, but it involves Han Chinese.
Okay.
And it's arranged as a long-term loan.
Are there any other hands raised at the moment? If not,
Any others? No.
okay, maybe just one more question before we go on break. You had mentioned that for Mokai, they wanted it to be different than the first encounter they had with the Cultural Preservation Act. Can you just very briefly talk about what was the community unhappy about during their first experience?
The Preservation Act was first. It came out in 1982, and it was modified 2-3 times. And the last time it was modified was in 2016. So I don't think it's a direct impact of the Preservation Act. It's the whole atmosphere became very friendly with indigenous community since the indigenous basic law passed in 2005 or 2007. After that, many legal regulations favoring indigenous rights have been passed, and the entire atmosphere and also political change moving away from mainland China to have a multicultural Taiwan is stressed. And to make a multicultural Taiwan, indigenous population, Austronesian-speaking indigenous population is a focus. And artifacts are visible. So before 2012, the application of the statute from Academia Sinica, theirs were the first indigenous artifacts granted the status of national treasure. So the law was there, Preservation Act was there, but most of the museum didn't bother to apply. They mainly applied for Han Chinese rituals, temple rituals, artifacts, religious artifacts for the status of national treasure. So the Ministry of Culture pressured museums under its administration for funding for extra projects, so on. I pressured them to apply, to focus on indigenous artifacts. And our museum is known for our collection of indigenous artifacts. We are the second largest museum with such a collection. Also, our collection is a second oldest.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Tong Yuan-chao and Ms. Huang Wei-chun. It's a very interesting example of relationship building with communities and museums. We'll now take, and by the way, Dr. Tong and Ms. Huang will both be participating in parts of our program today. But we will come back at 15 past, a quarter past the hour. And at that time, Aoife will continue with the moderations. So thank you and see you soon.